You ever had a rule that was supposed to help but ended up just feeling like a heavy weight? Well, today we're going to dive into one of Jesus's most freeing teachings. It's all about putting people ahead of rules. It's a wild story about a beautiful gift that got twisted into a chain and how it was finally set right. And at the very heart of it is this one powerful statement: the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. I mean, just let that sink in. This single line cuts right through a tendency that we see all the time: the habit of taking God's gifts and turning them into heavy burdens. Okay, so that sounds good, but what does it really mean for you and me? To get it, we've got to go back to the story that sparked these famous words in the first place. All right, section 1, a Sabbath standoff. This is where things get interesting. We're about to see a direct confrontation where a simple act of hunger puts ancient rules and radical compassion on a collision course. So picture this. Jesus and his disciples are just walking through a grain field. They're hungry, so they start grabbing some grain to eat. A simple snack, right? Well, not to the religious leaders watching, the Pharisees. For them, this wasn't just lunch. Oh no, this was a major violation of their super strict Sabbath rules. And this is where you see the two worldviews just smash into each other. On one side, the Pharisees saw a rule being broken, period. They prioritized the regulation. In their minds, hunger can wait, but the rules, they can't. But Jesus, he saw something completely different. He saw a basic human need being met. He always prioritized people, and he knew that compassion just can't wait. To really get how radical Jesus's perspective was, we need to hit rewind for a second and look at what the Sabbath was all about in the first place. Was it always this complicated? Let's find out. Section 2, a gift of rest. You know, the Sabbath didn't even start as a rule. It goes all the way back to creation, when God rested, setting up this beautiful rhythm of work and restoration for all of us. And then later, in Exodus, it's given as a command. But check out why. It was a command of mercy. It was literally designed to protect the newly freed Israelite slaves from the kind of endless, crushing work they just escaped in Egypt. So here's the bottom line. The Sabbath was basically God's way of declaring, you are not slaves anymore. Not to a pharaoh, not to productivity, not even to the daily grind of survival. You're free. And because you're free, you can rest. Okay, so if the Sabbath started as its amazing gift of freedom, how on earth did it become the source of the fight we just saw in the grain field? Well, that brings us to section 3, where we see how this gift became a chain, the burden of rules. It's pretty sad, really. Over hundreds of years, this beautiful, merciful gift got buried under piles and piles of man-made regulations. Religious leaders just kept adding more and more rules about what you could and couldn't do. And the irony is just staggering. The one day that was designed for rest had become the most stressful, anxious day of the entire week. And this just lays out the tragic transformation perfectly. A gift becomes a burden. A command for freedom becomes a chain. A day of rest becomes a day of stress. And a powerful sign of freedom gets twisted into a tool for control. So this is the broken system that Jesus walks right into. He's not just confronting a few angry leaders, he is taking on centuries of tradition that buried a gift under a mountain of rules. In section 4, we'll see how he starts digging that gift out, showing everyone how mercy fulfills the law. And this is where Jesus's actions are just so powerful. He consistently and very publicly healed people on the Sabbath. Now, this wasn't just him trying to stir up trouble. He wasn't trying to break God's law. He was trying to rescue it, to show everyone its true compassionate purpose after centuries of misuse. And it all leads to this profound, game-changing idea. Mercy is not a Sabbath violation. It is a Sabbath expression. For Jesus, doing something compassionate wasn't the exception to the rule. It was the whole point of the rule. So let's give this idea a name: Sabbath fulfillment. It's the concept that an act of kindness, like healing someone who's suffering, doesn't break God's law. It actually expresses its ultimate purpose, which is all about mercy and restoration. So what you have here are two totally competing ideas of obedience. On one side, you've got the Pharisees' view: obedience is just following a checklist of rules. But Jesus reveals something so much deeper, that true obedience is love in action. It's about reflecting the compassionate heart behind the law. And then Jesus makes his ultimate claim: He declares himself Lord of the Sabbath. Whoa. What he's saying is the entire idea of a day of rest was always pointing towards him. Think of it like this. The weekly day off was just the shadow, but he is the substance. He is the true source of rest. So why does the 2,000-year-old argument about grain fields matter to us now? Because that tension between rules and people is absolutely timeless. Let's bridge that gap in our final section, the lesson for today. This whole story really forces us to ask a tough question about our own beliefs, our own practices, whatever they are. Does what I do restore people, or does it crush them? And this really lays out the two paths in front of us. There's the error to avoid, choosing correctness over compassion, performance over people, and looking religious over meeting a real human need. But then there's the invitation to accept, to put mercy over regulation, relationship over rules, and God's restorative heart above everything else. And don't fool yourself, this tension is everywhere today. Seriously, think about it. We see it in rigid institutional policies, in community traditions that exclude people, in our own personal ethics, and yeah, even in our own families. The question is always the same. Do we put the rule first or the person? And maybe the most important lesson in all of this is that God doesn't need our exhaustion to prove our devotion. He isn't impressed by our burnout. What he actually desires is our trust, our willingness to just stop and rest in his care. Which leaves us with this final thought, a complete reframing of what it means to be still. Rest is not laziness, it is trust. It's the active declaration that we are not in control, but that we are cared for. And that, right there, might be the most freeing gift of all.